I'm 67 years old, and I never imagined that after 43 years of marriage, I would discover my husband cheating on me in the worst way possible. But what shocked me most wasn't just the betrayal. It was discovering who the other woman was. When I caught them both in my own home, my world fell apart. But I made a decision that changed everything. What I did at the church in front of the whole town was so impactful that people still talk about it today. If you want to know how a 67-year-old grandmother got her epic revenge and reclaimed her dignity, stay until the end of this true story. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more emotional stories like this one. My name is Grace. I'm 67 years old, and I never imagined that at my age I would discover my entire life had been a lie. On that Thursday afternoon, October 15th, the autumn sun slanted through the windows of the Harmony Creek Public Library, where I've worked for nearly 20 years, organizing books and helping the townspeople find their favorite reads. The familiar scent of old books mixed with the ever-present dust always gave me a sense of peace I cherished. But on that specific day, a strange restlessness had taken hold of my heart. Mrs. Thompson, the head librarian, had let all the staff go home early because of a plumbing problem that was flooding the basement. I glanced at the wall clock and saw it was only 2:30 in the afternoon. Normally, I wouldn't leave until 5. An idea popped into my head. Why not surprise Arthur? How long had it been since we'd done something like that? Maybe I could stop by Jerry's bakery, pick up those cinnamon rolls he loves so much, and get home early to prepare a nice snack for us to enjoy together. Arthur and I had been married for 43 years. He'd always been a hard-working man, the owner of a small hardware store in the center of town, and I'd always admired his dedication. Harmony Creek is a town where everybody knows everybody, where secrets are kept under lock and key. But when they do come out, they shake the entire community. Our marriage had always been seen as an example by our neighbors and friends. We were that couple who still walked hand in hand through the town square on Sundays, who shared the same pew at Sunday service, who celebrated every wedding anniversary with a special dinner at home. I walked through the familiar streets of Harmony Creek, feeling the crisp late autumn breeze tousle my gray hair. The old trees shading the sidewalk seemed to greet me as I passed, and I waved to Mrs. Gable, who was watering the mums on her porch. Everything seemed so normal, so familiar, so safe. How could I have imagined that in just a few minutes, my entire life would collapse like a house of cards? I got home at 3:15. Our house is on Maple Street, a quiet road where we've lived for over 40 years. It's a simple house, with a large backyard where I have my vegetable garden, and where Arthur planted a crabapple tree that has been bearing fruit for over 15 years. The light blue paint on the exterior was a bit faded by time, but it was our home, built brick by brick, with so much sweat and dedication. When I reached the gate, I noticed the store must have closed early too, because Arthur's truck was parked in the driveway. That was odd. He never closed the shop before 6, not even when he was sick. I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well, and that worried me. I decided to use the back door, which leads directly into the kitchen, so I wouldn't make any noise in case he was resting. I put the key in the lock slowly, turned it carefully, and opened the door. The house was silent, but I could hear voices coming from the living room. My first thought was that maybe it was the television, but when I listened more closely, I realized they were real voices, low whispers, muffled laughter. One was definitely Arthur's voice, but the other was a female voice I knew very well. My heart began to pound. I tiptoed through the kitchen, past the table where we'd had breakfast together every morning for over 4 decades. The smell of brewed coffee still lingered in the air, mixed with something else, a sweet perfume that wasn't mine, a perfume I knew well, very well. When I reached the door that separates the kitchen from the living room, I pressed my ear against the wood and listened. Arthur was talking to someone, and that person was laughing in that specific coy way I'd known for over 20 years. It was Dalila's laugh. Dalila was 45, with brown hair that was always perfectly styled, and she was one of my best friends. We'd known each other since she moved to Harmony Creek, newly married, and since then, we had developed a friendship I considered solid as a rock. She was always at my house. We always talked about everything. We always shared our joys and sorrows. Dalila knew every detail of my life, all my secrets, all my insecurities. But what was she doing in my house on a Thursday afternoon, alone with my husband? I opened the door carefully, just a crack, and what I saw made my world completely shatter. Arthur was sitting on our sofa, that floral print sofa we bought 10 years ago, and Dalila was on his lap. They were kissing. Not a friendly kiss, not an innocent peck. It was a lover's kiss. Intimate, passionate, desperate. My vision blurred. I felt as if someone had punched me in the stomach and pulled the rug out from under my feet at the same time. My legs began to shake so much that I thought I would faint right there. How was this possible? How could my husband of 43 years, the man who slept beside me every night, who wished me a good morning every day with a kiss on the forehead, how could this man be there, in our living room, kissing my best friend? I managed to back away from the door without making a sound and ran into the backyard through the back door. My hands were trembling so much I could barely grip the doorknob. Once in the yard, I hid behind the crabapple tree, that same tree Arthur had planted with such care years ago, and tried to process what I had just witnessed. Tears began to stream down my face, and I couldn't stop them. 43 years of marriage, 43 years of trust, companionship, and love. Or so I thought. 20 years of friendship with Dalila. 20 years of sharing secrets, laughter, joys, and sorrows. And now, to discover it was all a sham, I took a notepad and a pen that I always carry in my purse, and began to write down everything I had seen. The time, the date, their position, every detail I could remember. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was a self-preservation instinct, or maybe my practical librarian's mind told me to document everything. I stayed there, hidden behind the crabapple tree, for over an hour. During that time, I heard laughter coming from inside the house, heard Dalila's voice saying things I couldn't fully understand, but which had an intimate, affectionate tone that tore my heart to pieces. At one point, I heard the front door open and the sound of footsteps on the porch. Dalila was leaving. I waited a few more minutes and then went back inside. Arthur was in the kitchen making coffee, whistling softly as if nothing had happened. When he saw me, he smiled in that way I had known for so long. "Hi, honey. Glad you're home early today. How was your day at the library?" I looked at him and tried to smile back, but my face felt stiff, like a mask. How could he act so naturally? How could he look me in the eye and pretend nothing had happened? "It was fine," I managed to reply. "And yours? Why did you close the store early?" Business was slow today. I decided to come home and relax a bit. You know how it is, right? Sometimes you just need to unwind. Unwind. The word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. He had unwound, all right. In the arms of my best friend. In our living room. On our sofa. That night, lying in bed next to him, I listened to his steady breathing as he slept soundly. I, on the other hand, stayed awake all night, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had turned into a nightmare in a matter of minutes. How many times had this happened? How long had they been betraying me? And more importantly, what was I supposed to do now? Because one thing I knew for sure. After what I had discovered that afternoon, nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed that cursed Thursday were the hardest of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, going through the motions of my routine, but inside, I felt as if my world had been turned upside down. Every morning, Arthur would give me the same kiss on the forehead, ask if I had slept well, and I would say yes, pretending that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. At the library, I tried to focus on my work, but my mind constantly drifted back to that terrible scene I had witnessed. Mrs. Thompson even asked if I was feeling all right because I had dropped a stack of books 3 times in the same week, something that never happened to me. I had always been an organized, meticulous, careful person. But now, my inner world was in such disarray that I couldn't concentrate on the simplest tasks. For the first few days, I considered confronting Arthur directly. Several times I approached him, opened my mouth to say, "I saw you with Delilah," but the words just wouldn't come out. I was afraid of his reaction, afraid he would confirm what I already knew, afraid our life together would end right then and there. 43 years of marriage is no small thing. It was more than 4 decades of shared history, of memories built together, of dreams realized side by side. But as the days went by, a strange determination grew inside me. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to know how long this had been going on, whether it was just a passing affair or something more serious. My personality had always been discreet and conciliatory. I always preferred to avoid conflict. I was always the one who made peace between friends when they fought. But the betrayal had awakened a strength in me that I didn't even know I had. It was in the 2nd week after the discovery that I decided to investigate on my own. I started paying attention to the details, the small signs that I might have ignored before. Arthur had always been a man of fixed habits. He woke up at 6 in the morning, had his coffee, read the newspaper, opened the store at 8 sharp, and closed at 6 in the evening. But now I noticed that some things had changed. He was showering more often during the week, something he usually only did on Saturdays and Sundays. He was using an aftershave I didn't recognize, with a different, sweeter scent, and he had bought new shirts, more modern ones, in colors he had never worn before. How had I not noticed this before? The following Thursday, exactly 1 week after the discovery, I decided to leave the library early again. I made up an excuse to Mrs. Thompson about a doctor's appointment and left at 2 in the afternoon. But this time, instead of going straight home, I first drove past the street where Arthur's store is. I wanted to check if he was really there. The store was open, but Arthur wasn't at the counter. I asked Mr. Jenkins, who works at the auto shop next door, if he had seen my husband. Mr. Jenkins told me that Arthur had left about 20 minutes ago, saying he had to run some errands at the bank. I thanked him and left, but my heart was already racing. What bank? Arthur always handled banking matters on Friday mornings, never on Thursday afternoons. This time I went home prepared. I entered through the back door and positioned myself strategically behind the kitchen curtain, where I could see the living room without being seen. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:15, I heard the sound of a key in the front door lock. Arthur came in, but he wasn't alone. Delilah was with him. What hurt most wasn't just the fact that they were cheating on me, but the natural way they behaved in my home. Delilah knew every corner of that place. She knew where things were. She moved through the room as if she owned it. They were talking softly, but I could catch a few words. I heard Delilah say something about getting this situation sorted out soon, and Arthur replying that we need to be patient. What situation? Patience for what? I watched for almost 2 hours. I saw them drink coffee in my kitchen, using the mugs I received as a wedding gift. I saw Delilah take some papers out of her purse and show them to Arthur, who analyzed them with great attention. I saw my husband embrace that woman with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. When they parted around 5 o'clock, I hid in the bathroom and waited for Delilah to leave. Arthur stayed home, took another shower, his second of the day, And when I arrived from work at 6, he was watching television as if nothing had happened. In the following days, I began to investigate more systematically. I found out that Arthur was leaving the store several times during the week, always in the mid-afternoon, and always came back with a different perfume on him. I started writing everything down: the days, the times, the changes in his behavior. It was during one of these investigations that I made a discovery that chilled me to the bone. I was searching through the dresser drawer in our bedroom, looking for some clue, when I found an envelope hidden behind Arthur's socks. Inside the envelope was a copy of the deed to our house, but it wasn't an ordinary copy. It was an official document from the county recorder's office, dated 2 months ago. My hand trembled as I read what was written. The deed to our house, the house we had built together over so many years, had been transferred to the name Dalila Mendez. My house, my home, the place where I had lived most of my adult life, now belonged to the woman who was sleeping with my husband. I sat on the bed and tried to process that information. How was this possible? How had Arthur managed to transfer the house without my signature? And more importantly, why had he done it? That night, pretending I had a headache, I went to bed early. But I didn't sleep a wink. I lay there next to Arthur, listening to his peaceful breathing, and wondered who this man was that I had shared a bed with for over 4 decades. How could he sleep so soundly knowing what he had done? The next day, which was a Saturday, Arthur said he was going to the store to do inventory. Strange, because he never worked on Saturdays. As soon as he left, I rushed to the county clerk's office. Mrs. Davis, who has worked there for years and knows me well, greeted me warmly. "Grace, how nice to see you. How are you, dear?" "Hi, Mrs. Davis. I'm fine, thank you. I came here because I need some information about the deed to my house. There was a recent transfer, and I wanted to better understand how it was done." Mrs. Davis led me to the archives and pulled the documentation. When I saw the papers, I almost fell out of my chair. My signature was there, notarized, authorizing the transfer. But I had never signed those papers. I had never set foot in that office to do such a thing. "Mrs. Davis, do you remember when I came here to sign these documents?" She looked at me with a confused expression. "You didn't come, dear. It was your friend Dalila who brought the documents. She said you couldn't come because you were ill, but that you had signed everything at home, in the presence of 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses. What witnesses? And more importantly, had Dalila forged my signature? I left the office with my legs shaky and my heart pounding. The situation was much worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just an affair. It was a financial scheme, an elaborate plot to steal everything I had worked for my entire life. When I got home, Arthur hadn't returned yet. I sat on the porch and looked out at the street where I had lived for so long. The same houses, the same trees, the same neighbors. Everything looked the same, but I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. My life had become a lie, and I needed to find out how deep that lie went. It was at that moment that I made a decision that would change everything. I would no longer be the passive victim in this story. I was going to find out the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. And when I found out, I was going to take matters into my own hands. Because if Dalila and Arthur thought they could destroy me and get away with it, they were sorely mistaken. From that Saturday on, my life became a constant investigation. I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach, but also with a growing determination to uncover the whole truth. My routine remained the same on the outside. Work at the library, household chores, casual conversations with Arthur. But inside, I was building a case against him and Dalila, piece by piece. The following Monday, I decided to visit Jerry at his bakery. He'd always been an observant man, the kind who knows all the town's comings and goings. While buying some bread, I struck up a conversation about Dalila, trying to sound casual. "Jerry, has Dalila seemed a bit odd to you lately? It seems like she has money to spare, buying expensive things." Jerry's eyes lit up with that look of someone who has gossip to share. Ah, Grace, you noticed too? Yes, she's been acting different. Last week she came in here and paid her entire month's tab in cash, which she never does. And yesterday I saw her coming out of Mr. Antonio's jewelry store with a bag in her hand. Told his wife she was buying a gift for her husband. Husband? Frank. I had almost forgotten that Dalila was married. How did she manage to deceive two men at the same time? And where was she getting the money to buy jewelry? On Thursday, I decided to run another test. I called Dalila in the morning, feigning normalcy. Hi, Dalila. How are you? I was wondering if you have time for coffee this afternoon. It's been a while since we've had a proper chat. Oh, Grace, I'd love to, but I can't today. I have to go to Columbus to sort some things out. How about tomorrow? Columbus? Interesting. I hung up the phone and immediately called Arthur's store. Hello, honey. Just wanted to see how you are. Busy today? It's quiet over here. Actually, I need to step out later to deal with a supplier. I might be home a little later. Of course. A supplier. On the same afternoon Dalila was supposedly in Columbus. Did they think I was a complete idiot? At 2 in the afternoon, I left the library and positioned myself in a strategic spot, the bar at Mario's, which is on the corner of our street. From there, I could see who came and went without being noticed. I didn't have to wait long. At 3 o'clock sharp, I saw Dalila's car park in front of my house. She got out with a large bag in her hand and went inside using a key that she... Wait, what key? My blood ran cold. Dalila had a key to my house? When had Arthur given her a key? And for how long had they been using my own home for their trysts? I watched for 2 hours. During that time, I saw Dalila come out onto the porch twice to answer her phone, always speaking softly, always looking around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. At one point, I saw her hanging clothes on the backyard clothesline, clothes that weren't mine or Arthur's, women's clothes, intimate apparel, that clearly belonged to her. The reality hit me like a punch to the gut. Dalila wasn't just having an affair with my husband. She was practically living in my house. When it was time for her to leave, I waited for her to go, and then went home. Arthur arrived half an hour later, with the same sweet perfume on him and a smile on his face that made me feel nauseous. How was your day, my love? I looked at him and felt a rage so intense that for a moment I thought I would explode right there. But I controlled myself. It wasn't time to confront him yet. I needed more information. Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now and hit the bell to stay updated. Now, back to the story. It was normal. And yours? How was the meeting with the supplier? Oh, it was good. I managed to negotiate some better prices for next month. Lie after lie. How could he look me in the eye and lie with such ease? That night, while he was in the shower, I went through his things again. In his wallet, I found a folded piece of paper with an address written on it. 45 Palm Street, Millfield. That wasn't an address in Harmony Creek. Why would Arthur have an address from Millfield written down? Over the weekend, I made up an excuse about visiting a cousin and drove to Millfield to investigate. 45 Palm Street was a simple but well-kept house. I rang the bell, and a woman in her 50s answered. Good afternoon. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm looking for information about Dalila Mendez. I heard she used to live here. The woman looked at me suspiciously. Dalila? I haven't heard that name in a long time. Why are you asking? I'm a friend of hers, and I've lost touch. I really wanted to talk to her. The woman sighed. Look, ma'am, if you're really a friend of Dalila's, then you need to know a few things. That woman is not who she seems to be. She lived here, yes, but she fled in the middle of the night, leaving debts everywhere. She deceived my brother, who had been married for 15 years, telling him she was in love with him. She convinced him to sell his house and give her the money, saying they would start a new life together, somewhere else. In the end, she disappeared with everything and left my brother destitute. I felt my world spin. This wasn't the first time Delilah had done this. She was a professional con artist. Your brother. Does he still live here? No. After she'd destroyed his life, he left town. He couldn't stand the gossip, the shame. The last I heard, he was working on a farm out in the country, trying to save up to start over. I left Millfield with a heavy heart and a racing mind. How many other victims had Delilah claimed? And more importantly, did Arthur know who she really was? Or was he being deceived too? On Monday, I went back to the county clerk's office with some excuse and managed to convince Mrs. Davis to let me see other documents related to Delilah. What I discovered left me floored. In the last 3 years, Delilah had processed property transfers for at least 4 different properties, all from married men, all using signatures that looked forged. She was far more dangerous than I had imagined. That afternoon, when Arthur got home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with all the documents spread out in front of me. When he saw me, his face turned white as a sheet. "Grace, what is this?" "It's the truth, Arthur. It's the truth about the woman you think you love." I showed him everything I had discovered. The other fraudulent property transfers. The story of the man in Millfield. The lies about Delilah's age. Arthur sank into a chair, his legs trembling. I didn't know about any of that, Grace. She told me she needed the house in her name because of problems with the IRS. That it was temporary. And you believed her? You transferred our home, Arthur. The house we've lived in for 40 years. I thought it was real love. After so many years of marriage, when she came into my life, I felt like I was young again. I looked at this man who had been my partner for so long and felt a mixture of anger and pity. He had been deceived, too, but that didn't lessen the pain of the betrayal. "Arthur, we need to reverse this transfer, and we need to expose Delilah before she finds other victims." He shook his head, defeated. "It won't be easy. She said if I tried to back out, she would tell the whole town about our relationship. She would destroy my reputation." It was in that moment that I realized Arthur wasn't just a victim. He was protecting his own image, even if it meant hurting me. The pain of that discovery was like a knife in my chest. I stood up from the table and looked at him with a firmness I didn't even know I possessed. "Then you choose, Arthur. Either you help me get back what's ours or I'll do it alone. But one way or another, Delilah is going to pay for what she's done." And in that moment, seeing the fear in his eyes, I knew I could no longer count on anyone but myself. In the days following my conversation with Arthur, I felt as if I were carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. My husband had chosen to protect Delilah instead of helping me, and that discovery hurt more than the betrayal itself. 43 years of marriage had come down to this. He was willing to sacrifice me to preserve his reputation in town. But I wasn't going to give up. If I had to fight alone, I would. I started to formulate a plan, but I knew I would need help. And that's when I remembered Frank, Delilah's husband. If she was deceiving me and Arthur, she was certainly deceiving him too. Frank Miller was 58 and owned a small trucking company in the neighboring town of Westwood. I knew him by sight, because he sometimes came to Harmony Creek to pick up Delilah. But we had never talked much. He was a simple, hard-working man who woke up early every day to run his business. The following Thursday, I made an excuse at the library and took a bus to Westwood. Frank's company was on a busy downtown street, and when I arrived, he was supervising the loading of a truck. When he saw me, he looked surprised. "Grace, what a surprise to see you here. Is everything all right with Delilah?" His question gave me the perfect opening. "Actually, Frank, I need to talk to you about your wife. It's a delicate matter, and I think we should talk in private." He led me to his office, a small but organized room that smelled of strong coffee and had papers scattered across the desk. I sat in the chair opposite him and took a deep breath. I didn't know how to start this conversation without sounding like a crazy person. "Frank, do you know where Dalila spends her Thursday afternoons?" He frowned. "Thursday. She told me she goes to Harmony Creek to do some shopping. Sometimes visits you. Why? Because she's not shopping, Frank. She's at my house, with my husband." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Frank's face change color, from normal to a deep red, then to a pale white. His hands were shaking as he reached for a glass of water. What are you saying?" I told him everything. The discovery of the affair, the fraudulent transfer of the house, the investigation in Millfield, Dalila's other victims. With every word I spoke, I saw Frank shrink in his chair, as if he were being repeatedly punched. When I finished, he sat in silence for several long minutes, staring at his own hands. "I knew something was off," he finally murmured. "For the past few months, she's been different. More affectionate, more attentive, but at the same time, more distant. And 2 weeks ago, she asked me to sign some papers, said it was to simplify our taxes. I signed without reading them properly." My heart pounded. "What kind of papers, Frank?" "I don't know for sure. She said it was something for the accountant. But now that you're telling me this, do you think she could have tricked me too?" We left his office together and went straight to the county clerk's office in Westwood. The clerk who assisted us confirmed our worst fears. 2 days earlier, Dalila had registered a transfer of Frank's trucking company to her own name, using documents he had signed without knowing what he was doing. Frank was so distraught I had to hold him to keep him from collapsing right there. In a matter of minutes, he had discovered that his wife of 5 years was a complete fraud, that he had lost his company, and that he was being cheated on in the same way I was. My God, Grace. She took everything. My company. My house. What am I going to do now? We're going to fight, Frank. Together. She may have tricked us, but it's not too late to get back what's ours. That day we formed an unlikely alliance. 2 betrayed spouses, united by pain, and the determination to see justice done. Frank told me more details about Dalila that I didn't know. She received letters from other states, always kept under lock and key. She had a secret bank account she never mentioned. And in recent weeks she had started talking about traveling to see new horizons. During the bus ride back to Harmony Creek, my mind was racing. Dalila was preparing to flee again, just as she had in Millfield. She had our house, Frank's company, and was likely running the same scam on other people. We needed to act fast. When I got home, I found Arthur watching television, as if nothing was wrong. His nonchalance made me sick. I sat next to him on the sofa and decided to try one last time. "Arthur, I spoke with Frank today. Dalila stole his company too. She doesn't love you. She's using you just like she's used several other men." He didn't even look away from the television. "Grace, please, you're exaggerating. Dalila explained those other situations to me. She was trying to help people who had financial problems. His blindness was painful. Or maybe he just didn't want to see the truth, because that would mean admitting he'd been an idiot." "Arthur, she forged my signature. That's a crime." "You can't prove that." That's when I realized I was wasting my time. Arthur had chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. I got up from the sofa and went to the bedroom. But before leaving the room, I turned to him, one last time. "When she skips town with everything you both stole from me, I hope you remember this conversation." On Friday, Frank met me at the library. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he also had a determination I recognized. It was the same one growing inside me. "Grace, I found out something else. Dalila has regular meetings with a lawyer in Columbus. I got the address of his office." "A lawyer? For what?" "I don't know, but I bet it's nothing good for us." We decided to go to Columbus together on Saturday. The lawyer's office was in a commercial building downtown. We went there pretending to be interested in hiring his services. But what we discovered was much worse than we had imagined. The lawyer, a Mr. Myers, specialized in property transfers and identity changes. When we mentioned Dalila's name, he became immediately suspicious, but we managed to extract some information. Dalila had hired his services to regularize some documentary issues and was planning a move to another state in the coming weeks. We left the office in a panic. Dalila was preparing to disappear, probably assuming a new identity, taking with her everything she had stolen from us and other victims. Frank, we don't have much time. If she runs, we'll never get our assets back. Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now and hit the bell to stay updated. Now, back to the story. What do you suggest? It was then that I had an idea that would change everything. It was risky, but it was our only chance to expose Dalila publicly and reclaim what was ours. The parish's annual summer festival is next week. The whole town will be there, including Dalila and Arthur. If we can gather all the evidence and expose her publicly, in front of the entire community, she'll have nowhere to run. Frank looked at me with admiration. You've got guts, Grace. I don't know if I could do that. It's not guts, Frank. It's desperation. Because if we don't do something now, we're going to lose everything we've built in our lives. And so, we began to plan our revenge. The week leading up to the parish summer festival was the most intense of my life. Frank and I met secretly every day to organize our plan to expose Dalila. He had rented a small room in a boarding house in Harmony Creek so we could meet without raising suspicion. And there we spent hours organizing documents, preparing our strategy. During these meetings, I discovered that Frank was a much braver and more determined man than I had imagined. The betrayal had awakened in him a strength I recognized in myself. For the past 5 years, he had worked tirelessly to build his trucking company, waking up at 5 in the morning, driving trucks when necessary, personally taking care of every detail of the business. Seeing it all stolen by a woman he trusted had turned his pain into fury. Grace, he told me one Tuesday, as we were organizing copies of the fraudulent documents, I've never been a man for revenge. I always believed things are resolved by talking, with patience. But what she did to us, this can't go unpunished. I completely agreed. Dalila had destroyed not only our marriages, but our trust in people, our faith in love, our financial security. And worse, she was preparing to do the same thing to other innocent victims. During the week, I continued to feign normalcy at home. Arthur kept to his usual routine, but I could tell he was more nervous. Several times I caught him looking at me with a strange expression, as if he were trying to figure out what I was thinking. Dalila was also acting differently. The few times I saw her on the street, she seemed anxious, hurried, like someone in a rush to finish something important. On Thursday, 3 days before the festival, I made a discovery that nearly ruined all our plans. I was coming home from the library when I saw Dalila leaving the downtown bank with a large folder under her arm. Something in her expression put me on alert. I decided to follow her. Dalila went straight to our house. It still hurt to call it ours, knowing that legally it now belonged to her. Arthur greeted her at the door with a kiss that made me feel sick. They went inside together, and I positioned myself behind the crabapple tree to watch. Through the living room window, I saw Dalila spreading papers on the coffee table. They were bank documents, statements, maybe contracts. Arthur analyzed everything carefully, nodding and taking notes. At one point, I saw Dalila pick up the phone and make a call. She spoke softly but gestured a lot like someone giving important instructions. When the call ended, I saw her stand up and hug Arthur. It wasn't a romantic hug, but a hug of farewell, of relief, as if something very important had been resolved. My blood ran cold. They were moving up their plans. The festival was on Saturday, but Dalila was preparing to leave before then. I ran to the boarding house where Frank was waiting for me. When I told him what I had seen, he turned pale. Grace, if she leaves before Saturday, we lose our only chance. The festival was perfect because the whole town would be there, including Father Michael, who could serve as a kind of mediator. But if she leaves before... She won't leave, I said with a determination that surprised even me. We're moving up our plan. The setup for the festival is tomorrow, Friday, for the organizers and volunteers. Dalila always helps with the decorations. She'll be there. Frank looked at me with concern. But there won't be as many people. It won't have the same impact. There will be enough. And more importantly, she won't be expecting it. We spent the entire night reorganizing our plan. Instead of waiting for the main event on Saturday, we would expose Dalila during the festival preparations on Friday afternoon. It would be a smaller group of people, but they would be the right people. The pillars of the community, the church organizers, the local leaders. On Friday morning, I woke up with my stomach in knots. This was the day. After weeks of suffering, investigation, and planning, the time had finally come to confront Dalila publicly. I was nervous, but also relieved. I couldn't bear to carry this weight alone anymore. Arthur left for the store as usual, suspecting nothing. At 2 p.m, I dressed carefully. I chose my navy blue dress, the same one I wore at our civil wedding 43 years ago. I wanted to look impeccable for that moment. I arrived at the church at 3 p.m. The parish hall was being decorated for the next day's festival. Colorful bunting, tables with checkered tablecloths, a small stage where there would be musical performances. Dalila was there, as I expected, helping other women organize the tables. She was wearing a red dress and smiling at everyone, charming and friendly as always. When she saw me, she waved cheerfully. "Grace, so glad you came to help. We still have so much to do." I looked at her and felt a mixture of anger and pity. She had no idea what was coming. "Of course, Dalila. I came to help." We worked side by side for an hour, arranging chairs and preparing tables. Dalila chatted normally with me, telling me about her plans to travel to visit relatives the following week. Every word she spoke was like a lie being rubbed in my face. At 4:30, Frank arrived. Dalila was surprised to see him. She didn't expect him to show up at a summer festival in Harmony Creek. "Frank, what are you doing here, honey?" "I came to get you so we can talk, Dalila. The 3 of us need to talk." That's when she realized something was wrong. Her eyes darted from me to Frank, and I saw the exact moment she understood that we had discovered everything. Her mask of friendliness fell, and for an instant, I saw the cold, calculating woman hiding behind the charm. "Talk about what?" Father Michael was nearby, arranging some chairs. This was the moment. I took a deep breath and said, loud enough for everyone in the hall to hear, "About how you forged my signature to steal my house, Dalila. And about how you stole Frank's company, too." The silence that followed was total. All conversation stopped. All movement ceased. The 15 or so people in the hall turned to us, and I could see on their faces a mixture of shock and curiosity. Dalila tried to laugh, as if it were a joke. "Grace, what is this? Have you gone mad?" "I haven't gone mad, Dalila. I've just discovered who you really are." It was then that Frank stepped forward with the folder of documents we had prepared. He handed it all to Father Michael, who had known our family for decades. "Father, here is the proof of everything she's done. Forged documents, forged signatures, stolen properties. And we've discovered she's done the same thing to at least 3 other men in neighboring towns." Father Michael examined the papers with growing attention. He was a man of 60, respected by the entire community, known for his wisdom and fairness. When he finished reading, he looked at Dalila with an expression of deep sorrow. "Dalila, is this true?" Dalila was cornered, but she still tried to lie. "Father, they're making these things up because they found out that Arthur and I fell in love. They're jealous. They want to hurt me." It was then that I stepped forward and said the sentence that would change everything. "Then explain how your real age is 52, not 45 like you tell everyone. Explain how you have a 30-year-old son you hide from the world. and explain why you have fake documents in other people's names. Dalila's face went white. She knew she was lost. The silence in the parish hall was deafening. Dalila stood there, in the middle of everyone, her face pale and her eyes filled with the desperation of someone caught red-handed. The people around us whispered among themselves, processing the accusations they had just heard. Mrs. Gable, who had always been close to Dalila, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. "A 30-year-old son," murmured Mrs. Rose, one of the festival organizers. "But Dalila always said she didn't have any children." It was then I realized I still had more cards to play. During the week of investigation with Frank, we had discovered information that even I couldn't believe was true. It was time to reveal everything. "That's not all," I continued, feeling a strange strength growing inside me. "Dalila, or rather, Darlene Peterson, that's her real name, is wanted by the police in at least 3 cities for fraud. She's been assuming false identities for over 10 years. Dalila looked at me with pure hatred, but still tried to deny it. "That's a lie. You're making it up. Then explain this," Frank said, pulling a photo from the folder. It was an old newspaper clipping, showing Dalila with different hair and another name. Wanted in Millfield for embezzlement. "We found this in the local newspaper's archives. You disappeared from there 3 years ago, after stealing the house and life savings of a local businessman." Father Michael examined the photo and the documents with growing alarm. He had known Dalila for 5 years, ever since she arrived in Harmony Creek, and had always considered her a woman of good character. The discovery that it had all been a facade visibly shook him. "Dalila, Darlene, whoever you are, this is very serious. If these accusations are true—" "They are true, Father," I said, pulling the last document from my purse, which I had saved for this moment. "And I have the final proof." It was a birth certificate we had managed to obtain through a contact of Frank's in Millfield. The document showed that Darlene Peterson had been born in 1971, not 1978, as she had always claimed, and it also listed the name of a son, Robert Peterson, born in 1993. "Your son Robert lives in Cleveland," I continued. "He works in a mechanic shop and has no idea his mother is running scams across the state. We spoke with him on the phone yesterday. He's been looking for you for 2 years, ever since you disappeared from his life without explanation." It was as if I had dropped a bomb in the middle of the room. Dalila, or Darlene, staggered and had to lean on a chair. Her lies were crumbling one by one, and she knew there was no way to deny it anymore. "Please," she murmured, looking around like a cornered animal. "You don't understand. I had no choice." "No choice?" I exploded, feeling all the anger that had been building for weeks finally come to the surface. "You chose to enter my house. You chose to seduce my husband. You chose to forge my signature. You chose to steal our home. And you stole my company," Frank added, his voice trembling with emotion. 5 years of hard work, 5 years building that business brick by brick." Mrs. Gable approached her, tears in her eyes. "Dalila, how could you? We trusted you. You were like a daughter to me." It was then that she broke down. The masks fell away completely, and for the first time, I saw the real Darlene Peterson, a desperate, lost woman who had chosen a path of destruction to try to escape her own problems. "Do you think it's easy?" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think I wanted to live like this? Lying, running, hurting people? But you don't know what it's like to have nothing. You don't know what it's like to be abandoned by your husband, with a young child, with no money, no prospects." The hall fell silent again. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But the pity was short-lived, because I remembered all the other victims, all the other homes destroyed. "That doesn't justify what you've done, Darlene," Father Michael said firmly. "Other people go through hardships and don't choose to harm innocents." "And where is Arthur?" asked Mrs. Rose. "Does he know about all this?" It was the question I had been dreading. I took a deep breath before answering. "Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now and hit the bell to stay updated. Now, back to the story. Arthur knows part of it. He knows about the affair. He knows about the fraudulent transfer of the house. But he chose to protect Delilah instead of helping me. A murmur of outrage rippled through the hall. Arthur was respected in the town, known for his honesty in business. To learn that he had chosen his mistress over his wife shocked everyone. It was at that moment that the hall door opened and Arthur walked in. He had closed the store early, probably to meet Delilah, and didn't expect to walk into this scene. When he saw all eyes on him, when he saw the documents spread on the table, when he saw Delilah crying, he understood immediately that everything had been discovered. "Grace," he began, but I cut him off. "No, Arthur. Don't try to explain. Everyone here already knows everything. They know you betrayed our 43-year marriage. They know you helped this woman steal our house. And they know you chose to protect her when I begged for your help." Arthur looked around, seeing the disappointment on the faces of the people who had known him for decades. Jerry from the bakery was there, shaking his head. Mrs. Thompson from the library had also arrived and was looking at him with sadness. I didn't know she had done these other things," he stammered. "She told me she needed the house because of tax problems, that it was, temporary." "And you believe that?" Frank asked. "To transfer an entire house to your mistress's name? What kind of tax problem would justify that?" Arthur lowered his head, speechless. The truth was he hadn't questioned it because he didn't want to. He was blinded by passion, or rather, by vanity, feeling young again in the arms of a younger woman. It was then that Delilah stood up from the chair, wiped her tears, and, in a final desperate gamble, went all in. "All right, you win. Yes, I lied about some things. Yes, I made some mistakes in the past. But do you want to know the whole truth? Arthur is not just a victim in this. He knew exactly what he was doing." Everyone turned to her, surprised. "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying your perfect little husband isn't as innocent as he seems. He didn't just know about the house transfer. He suggested it. He said it was a way to protect the assets in case you two got divorced. And what's more, he's been selling off store inventory for months to support our relationship. Expensive dinners, gifts, trips to nearby cities. Where do you think the money was coming from?" The world spun around me. If Delilah was telling the truth, it meant that Arthur wasn't just a man who had let himself be seduced. He was an active partner in the destruction of our marriage and our assets. I looked at my husband of 43 years and asked the question that would change everything. "Arthur, is that true?" The silence that followed was the answer I needed. Arthur's silence echoed through the parish hall like a confession. Everyone present looked at him, waiting for a vehement denial, an explanation, anything that could mitigate the terrible accusation Delilah had made. But he just stood there, head bowed, hands trembling, unable to deny what she had revealed. "My God," murmured Mrs. Gable, placing a hand on her chest. "Arthur, say it isn't true." But I already knew it was. In recent months, small details I had ignored began to make sense. The strange inventory levels at the store, the unexplained absences, the changes in his behavior. Arthur wasn't just a victim seduced by a con artist. He was her accomplice. "Speak, Arthur," I said, with a calmness that I didn't know I possessed. "After 43 years of marriage, you owe me at least the truth." He slowly raised his eyes, and when our gazes met, I saw something I had never seen before. Pure guilt, absolute shame, and a cowardice that made me nauseous. "Grace, I never wanted it to get to this point." "What point, Arthur? The point of being discovered? Or the point of betraying me in every way possible?" "It didn't happen like that," he exploded, finally reacting. When I met Delilah, I felt alive again. Our marriage has been dead for years, Grace. For years we've been living like two strangers in the same house. The pain of those words was like a slap in the face. 43 years of a shared life reduced to that. Two strangers. And that justifies stealing our house? Justifies lying to me every day? Justifies selling off store inventory to support your mistress? I wasn't stealing our house. I was protecting our assets. Protecting them from whom, Arthur? From me? From your own wife? It was Frank who intervened, pulling more documents from the folder. Arthur, do you want to know what your precious Delilah was really planning? Here are the contracts she signed with the lawyer in Columbus. She was going to sell your house, sell my company, and disappear to Florida under a new identity. Did you really think she was going to take you with her? Arthur took the papers with trembling hands. As he read, his expression changed from defensive to confused, and finally to shocked. This can't be right. Delilah told me we were going to start over together. She said that after we sorted out the legal issues, we would move to a smaller town and you believed her? Asked Father Michael. Arthur, how long have you known this woman? 2 years. And in 2 years you threw away an entire lifetime. Delilah, who had been silent while observing the argument, finally spoke up. Enough! Stop pretending I'm the only villain in this story. Arthur knew exactly what he was doing. He pursued me. He seduced me. He suggested the financial schemes. I just accepted his proposals. That's a lie, Arthur shouted. You're the one who pursued me. You showed up at the store. You started everything. Oh, really? And who suggested transferring the house? Who said his wife would never find out? Who gave me the keys to your house so I could come and go as I pleased? Every word was like a dagger. Arthur had given her the keys to our house. Our home had become their love nest, and I, like an idiot, had continued living there, oblivious. And who had the idea to forge Grace's signature? Delilah continued, now clearly determined to drag Arthur down into the pit with her. You said she never went to the county clerk's office, that no one would suspect. You're the one who taught me how she signed her name. The world collapsed around me. Arthur had not only allowed the forgery of my signature, he had taught Delilah how to do it. My own husband had been the architect of my ruin. Arthur, Father Michael said in a grave voice, this is a crime. Forgery, fraud, embezzlement. You know that, don't you? We were going to give everything back later. It was just temporary, until we sorted out the situation. What situation? I asked, though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. The divorce, Grace. We were going to wait for the right moment to ask for a divorce. Delilah said it would be better if you didn't end up with anything, because you're younger, you could start over more easily. The laugh that escaped my mouth was bitter, devoid of any humor. Younger? Arthur, I'm 67 years old. What do you think I'm going to do at 67, with no house, no money, no anything? You have your job at the library. You're independent. My job at the library pays me minimum wage. Our house was my only security for my old age. It was then that Mrs. Thompson, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Grace, you don't need to worry about that. The library will always be your home for as long as you want to work with us. And as for the house, Father, isn't there a legal way to reverse this fraudulent transfer? Father Michael thought for a moment. Yes, there is. With all this evidence of forgery and fraud, a judge would certainly annul the transfer, but it would require taking the matter to court. No, Delilah shouted. You can't do that. I have rights, too. What rights? Frank asked. The right to steal? The right to destroy families? The right to forge documents? I have a son to raise. I have bills to pay. You don't know how hard it is to be a single woman in this world. Then get an honest job, I exploded. Stop destroying other people's lives to solve your problems. It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. The hall door opened again, and a young man, about 30 years old, walked in, looking around as if searching for someone. He had the same eyes as Delilah, the same hair color. "Mom?" he said, looking directly at her. "I heard you were here." It was Robert, Delilah's son, whom she had abandoned. The same Robert we had contacted during our investigation. Frank had given him the church's address, hoping his presence might help resolve the situation. Delilah turned pale upon seeing him. "Robert, what are you doing here?" "I came to get you, Mom. I came to take you home. Enough of this life of lies and running away. I got a better job. Found a bigger apartment. You can stay with me. You can start over for real." The transformation in Delilah was instantaneous. The cold, calculating woman who had been arguing with us disappeared, and in her place emerged a desperate, vulnerable, frightened mother. "Robert, my son. I can't. I've done terrible things." "I know what you've done, Mom. These people told me everything on the phone, but this can be fixed. You can return what you stole. You can ask for forgiveness. You can start over." I looked at this young man, trying to convince his mother to do the right thing, and I felt my heart soften a little. For the first time in weeks, I saw a possibility for a resolution that didn't just involve punishment and revenge. "Delilah," I said, surprising everyone, including myself, "you have a chance here. Your son is offering you a way out. Give back what's ours. Sign the papers to undo the fraudulent transfers, and we don't have to take this any further." She looked at me in surprise, as if she couldn't believe I was offering clemency. You would do that? After everything I've done? "I would do it for your son, because he's not to blame for your mistakes, and he deserves to have a mother at home, not in a prison." The silence that followed was different from the others. It was a silence of hope, of the possibility of redemption, but it was also a fragile silence, one that could be broken by a single wrong word. And then Arthur spoke. "Don't miss the next videos. Subscribe now and hit the bell to stay updated. Now, back to the story. And me. What happens to me in this story?" Everyone turned to him, and I realized there was a much more important question to be asked. "Arthur, after everything that's been revealed here today, do you still think you're entitled to anything?" The question I asked Arthur echoed through the parish hall, like a final judgment. Everyone present looked at him, waiting for an answer that perhaps even he didn't know how to give. 43 years of marriage had come down to that moment. A man confronted with his own choices, with no more masks to hide behind. Arthur looked around, seeing the disappointment on the faces of the people who had known him for decades. Jerry shook his head in disapproval. Mrs. Gable had tears in her eyes. Father Michael looked at him with profound sadness. He was a man who had lost not only his family, but the respect of an entire community. "Grace," he said finally, his voice broken, "I know I'm not entitled to anything. I know I destroyed everything we built together. I know I betrayed not only our marriage, but your trust, your dignity, your security." He paused for a moment, running a hand through his gray hair, and continued. "But I need you to know that I never wanted it to get to this point. In the beginning, when I met Delilah, I thought it was just an adventure, something to make me feel young again. But she convinced me that our marriage had been over for years, that you would be happier without me. And you believed that?" I asked. "In 43 years of marriage, you never once thought to talk to me about it? Never thought to try to solve our problems together?" I was afraid, Grace. Afraid to admit I was unhappy. Afraid to hurt you. Afraid to face the truth. It was easier to believe her lies than to deal with reality. Delilah, who had been embracing her son, intervened. "Stop it, Arthur. Don't try to pin all the blame on me. You knew exactly what you were doing when you suggested transferring the house. You knew you were hurting Grace." "It's true," he admitted, looking directly at me. "I knew. And that's the part I'm most ashamed of. It wasn't just a momentary betrayal. It was a planned, calculated betrayal. I turned into a man I don't even recognize. Father Michael approached him. "Arthur, the first step to forgiveness is true repentance. Are you truly sorry? Or are you just afraid of the consequences?" The question made Arthur pause and think. For several long seconds he was silent, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in a very long time. Honesty. "I am sorry, Father. I'm sorry for hurting the woman who shared her life with me for so many years. I'm sorry for destroying our family. I'm sorry for becoming a man capable of stealing from his own wife." Robert, who had been watching everything in silence, addressed me. "Mrs. Grace, my mother is willing to sign all the necessary papers to return your properties. She wants to do the right thing." I looked at Dalila, who now seemed like a different woman. The veneer of charm and seduction had completely vanished, leaving in its place a tired, defeated, but perhaps, finally, honest person. "Is that true, Dalila?" "It's true," she said in a low voice. "I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to run, lie, and hurt people anymore. I want to go home with my son and try to rebuild my life honestly." "And Frank? Will you return his company too?" "Yes, everything. I'll return everything." Frank approached her, and for a moment I thought he would explode with rage, but instead he just shook his head sadly. "Dalila, 5 years of marriage. 5 years I thought were real. How did you manage to pretend for so long?" "It wasn't all pretend, Frank. In the beginning I really did try to be a good wife to you. But my problems, my fears, my insecurities, they were stronger than my good feelings. That doesn't justify what you did. I know, and I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. I just hope you can rebuild your life and be happy." It was then that I made a decision that surprised even myself. I approached Dalila and looked directly into her eyes. "Dalila, I will accept your offer to return everything, but on one condition." "What condition?" "I want you to seek professional help. I want you to go to therapy, to treat the problems that led you to act this way. Because it's no use returning our properties if you're just going to leave here and do the same thing to other people." Robert smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "I've already arranged that, Mrs. Grace. I've already scheduled appointments for her in Cleveland. She'll get treatment. I guarantee it." In the 3 months that followed that dramatic afternoon in the parish hall, my life changed completely. Dalila kept her word. She signed all the necessary documents to return our house and Frank's company. She and Robert went back to Cleveland, where she started psychological treatment and got a job with a cleaning company. It wasn't much, but it was honest. Arthur moved to Columbus, not to be near Dalila, but because he couldn't bear to face the disapproving looks in town anymore. He sold the hardware store and gave me half the money as a form of compensation. He said he was going to try to start over, maybe working as a salesman for some company. We divorced 6 months later. It was a peaceful process, with no fights or disputes. On the day of the hearing, he asked for my forgiveness one more time, and I said I forgave him, not for his sake but for my own, because carrying a grudge for the rest of my life would be like letting him continue to hurt me. Frank also managed to rebuild his life. He got his company back, and surprisingly, it grew more than ever. The traumatic experience had awakened in him an iron determination to never be financially vulnerable again. We became great friends. The shared pain had created a bond of mutual understanding between us. And me? I discovered that at 67, it was still possible to start over. I continued working at the library, but now I also give talks in other towns about how to identify and protect oneself from romance scams. My story, which was once a source of shame, has become a tool to help other women. I bought a small but cozy apartment in downtown Harmony Creek, where I can walk to work and maintain my independence. On Friday nights, Frank comes over for dinner, and we talk about our lives, our plans, our hopes. It's not romance. We both learned to value true friendship more than any passion. Today, 2 years after that afternoon that changed everything, I can say that I am a stronger, wiser, and strangely happier woman than I was before. The betrayal by Arthur and Delilah, as painful as it was, freed me from a life that had become an empty routine. It forced me to discover who I really was when I wasn't just someone's wife. Robert visits me from time to time, always bringing news of Delilah. She's doing well, working honestly, going to therapy, trying to rebuild the relationships she had destroyed. I don't know if I can ever consider her a friend again, but I can, finally, not consider her an enemy. Last Sunday, after the service, Father Michael approached me. "Grace, I want to extend an invitation to you. We're forming a support group for people who have gone through situations similar to yours. I would like you to coordinate the group." I looked at him and smiled. The same church where my life had been shattered was now offering me the opportunity to help others rebuild theirs. I accept, Father. I accept with great pleasure, because I learned that the greatest revenge against those who hurt us is not destruction, but reconstruction. It's not becoming like them, but becoming better than we were before. And when I look back at all the pain and suffering I went through, I can say with certainty it was worth the fight. It was worth discovering that inside me, there had always been a woman stronger than I ever imagined. A woman who not only survived the storm, but learned to dance in the rain. And that woman, finally, is me.